It's a good, yeah, great, yeah, exactly. I agree. It's a really good. I definitely recognize that in myself. Eating is kind of like something you have to do. It's okay. I'm not so bad, but
Mhm.
there's a lot of improvement. Room for improvement. But so when coming back to these types, martyrs, strivers, avoiders. So how would you usually, how you say that you would want everybody to become thrivers, yeah?
Mhm.
So what is like maybe a common problem, for example, for avoiders? You can maybe tell to our listeners who you think is an avoider when it comes to
Yeah.
self-care. Yeah,
Yeah. Now, avoider is the most complicated of these, and I want to have make a quick commentary that this is very amateur personality typing. I've never done any validated questionnaires on these personality types or anything like this. But I think at least with Striver and Martyr, a lot of people listening will probably get, those will resonate with people. They'll sort of,
definitely. Yeah.
yeah, right. And uh, I don't remember exactly, and I don't know if it was a colleague or if it was a client or if it came to me on my own or some combination of those. But that's when I had this saw that there was this third category, and I think they're the most difficult nut to crack, and because I don't think that they're what they've learned to do over their life is to, I don't mean this judgmentally, they've learned to pretend that their self care doesn't impact their life. They've learned to avoid that relationship between eating habits, exercise habits, overall self care habits, and their well being. Um, Now, I've been pleasantly surprised that people that I might characterize that way, that I know on a surface level, either in them coming to me as a client or them opening up in a personal relationship on some level, that almost as I was talking about earlier, they're not avoiding it as much as I think they are. Uh, they are thinking about it, and this is probably true of other areas of life. Like we might be able to observe in ourselves or someone else. Oh, they're the way they're accumulating debt. Uh, that's going in a bad road, down a road, and they seem to be able to pretend that it's not a problem. I think there's actually something about human nature that we're only sort of half pretending. We actually are sort of carrying the burden of that on some level. Now, one interesting thing is that in my observation, with all of those personality types, uh, what, and this is a hard thing about human nature. I don't, I almost wish this wasn't part of human nature, but it seems to be, is that it's coming to a point of pain that usually creates the opening for a shift in thinking and approach. And striver, martyr, or avoider, it's usually that. I'm thinking of someone in my mind that I think more fits the characterization of avoider, and he became a client of mine. I knew him locally before that, so that's how I feel like I had a sense of his personality. And he's a man of few words. His personality could be described as stoic, um, and so I took that as uh, he's not concerned with this kind of stuff. Um, and then he reached out and wanted to work with me, and then agreed to a 6-month course of session and paying for that, and that demonstrates some interest in caring about this. Then he remained rather stoic.
Mm.
It's interesting having hour-long wellness sessions with clients. There are people who are talkers, and I have to wrap it up, or we could go on for hours and hours. This gentleman, I was being as open and receptive and listening as best I could, and I couldn't keep him talking for more than 20 minutes. He just did not. He just didn't have much to say about this. He knew he wanted to. significantly lower his blood sugar levels. He knew he wanted to significantly lose weight. To the more emotional questions, such as why is this important to you, or what will this bring to your life, he didn't have that much to say initially. But then it didn't take long. And it was only in our second or third session, he opened up about a high school classmate. He was in his 60s at the time. So a high school classmate of his coming by his home or office and talking about really severe complications of type 2 diabetes. And I don't remember if it was imminent or really close to being imminent surgeries and things, related to
Mm.
that. And this man, very emotionally said to me, I'm too young for those kind of problems.
Mm.
There's too much, there's a lot I want to do. And, you know, I'm not going to let that happen to me. And he was emotional. He was,
Mm.
10% away from tears, thinking about his well-being. And the point of that story is that I think deep down, even though we live in these technologically advanced societies with tremendous medical care, deep down, most of us are aware that we're not that far away from a real problem,
Mm.
with our well-being. And when that becomes more clear to someone, whether it's through an experience of a peer like this gentleman or through a conversation with a physician and lab results,
Mm.
uh, it really does move people. It really does sort of stir something up in people, and that's something we use as wellness coaches. This might have come up in our last conversation, but the Latin root of the word emotion essentially means to move, to agitate, to stir.
Mm.
Um, and what we sometimes mistake in medicine, nutrition, exercise physiology is that the way we'll motivate people is with information.
Mm.
Information, by definition, if we're doing information well, it's emotionless, right? If we're practicing science well, it's relatively
That's
or
science.
entirely emotionless, right? That's one of the definitions of the word clinical, is
Mm.
sort of like cold and emotionless, right? And so it's an interesting challenge, is that we need to use information and we need to be clinical. And in the game of motivation, we need to use a client's motivation for all that it's worth, because that emotion is what's going to move them to change and improve.
So how did it go with that gentleman? Did he improve, or what happened to
Yeah,
him?
it went fairly well, and what's this is kind of heartening is that um, his fundamental temperament or personality remained. He didn't all of a sudden become the most outwardly emotional, outwardly passionate person, but he used uh, his emotions, and he used his values and what was personally important to him to really make some changes. And um, yeah, I would say he had what is the fairly typical, uh, not necessarily Hollywood style sexy transformation, meaning you see the things that come up on Facebook, and it's a before and after photo, and someone, it's a whole different person, right? What I
Mm.
often see in something like 6 months, which is my most common way of working with a client, if they have weight to lose, they lose something like a pound a week in a very
Mm.
sustainable fashion. And things like blood pressure and blood cholesterol levels and blood sugar levels optimize. And that's roughly what this gentleman saw. He probably lost about 20 pounds. If I'm remembering right, his blood pressure and blood cholesterol levels were fine to start, or decent. It was his blood sugar that was a real problem, and he was able to make a lot of progress with that.
Yeah, it's great, and I'm quite sure that the slow changes are more permanent. So it's quite it's really important that people can keep up with the routine. I'm I'm sure many of us sometimes on some area have tried something, trying to get into shape, to run a 5K fast, or, do something in a short notice, and it doesn't really work very well. So
Sure.
I'm sure your way is better. So mm, do you think that the behavior patterns that or personalities that we just talked about, do you think we are born with them, or do you think they develop as we're children? Do we copy them from our parents, or how do you think somebody turns up to be a martyr, for example?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think we do come into life with a bit of a temperament. I
Mm,
noticed that in my nephews and nieces. Uh, and then certainly our personality that forms is tremendously influenced by our upbringing. There's just no doubt about that. The idea that we don't do what our parents tell us to do, we become our parents, I think is very interesting. We're watching them, very, very, very closely. When we're at our youngest, they're gods to us, right? They are our path to how to grow up and be an adult. Uh, so well below rational thought, we are emulating them and ultimately, becoming them in many ways. And then we're shaped also by personal experiences, that are unique to us, that, for example, that our brothers and sisters might not have, even though we had the same parents. My experience of being overweight as a teenager,
mm,
and the pain of that, and how I reacted to that, the ways I wanted to protect myself, certainly formed how I approached behavior, going into young adulthood. Uh, yeah, I think this is an incredible. This is an interesting. There are a few interesting areas to explore as a wellness coach, because I am almost hyper focused on working with an adult individual, right? And so,
mm,
what we're really working with are the parameters within that person, uh, and what they have access to at that point in their life in terms of their family and their community and all of that. But if we're looking at the question of what what factors contribute to a robust 35-year-old or 45-year-old or 85-year-old or 95-year-old, then certainly our upbringing is a huge factor, and there's a lot of good scientific evidence to support that idea. And you brought something up earlier, um, beyond our family, the local community we live in, the larger culture that we live
mm,
in, um, all present ideas and circumstances that have an influence on us.
definitely, yeah. Have you I myself find that it sometimes motivates me, because I know that my child is taking, he's kind of learning everything from us. And from, for example, from my own life experience, I know that having regular eating times has not been always like that at my home. And
Mhm.
this is why I think I was struggling with that. It's not like eating unhealthy, but it's just very unregular.
Uh-huh.
So I'm trying to teach something else for my child, because I know that otherwise he's going to have to do it by himself. Do you find that motivating parents through their children, do you do that, or does it come up with the clients? Do the clients find that motivational?
Yes, yes, with an exclamation point. When I ask broad, open-ended questions that are leaning toward a person's values, I would go so far as to say that a very high percentage of the values that a person speaks out when they say why um, taking good care of themselves is important to them comes down to people. So
Mm,
it's not always their children, but to people broadly,
mm,
and to parents, uh, it is very common to say, yes, well, this will improve my life, and I want to be a good role model. I want to have my kids get off to a good start. I want to make sure they're not struggling with this in
Mm.
their 30s and 40s. I think that's very common. Now, there's also something that's very interesting, which is I've seen this happen a lot recently, so it's really on the top of my mind, which is uh, a parent's kids will start to get involved specifically with helping with eating habits in some way. Now, the kid isn't thinking of eating habits; they're thinking of it as I'm helping with dinner, or I'm
Yeah.
helping with food shopping, or I'm picking out recipe. And what's really neat is that role modeling is happening, but it adds motivation for the adult. It's so I'll give you an example. I have some clients who have got their kids involved with using their phone or computer to look up recipes, and then they'll make something together, and the kids will really they don't view it as a chore. They view all these different ingredients as something to play with, and the next weekend will come around, and the parent, if they were only relying on their own motivation, might be thinking, oh, prepping some food for this week is a chore. But the kids come, figuratively or literally tugging at their pant leg saying, can we make soup again, mom? And
Yeah.
what happens here is it's almost the motivation equivalent of having a workout partner,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
someone doesn't want to go to their workout. That often what'll get them there is that their partner calls and says, hey, we're meeting to go to the gym at 10 o'clock, right?
Mm.
um, so that is a really neat thing, is when the family is in something together, uh, the primary person who might be working on improving their habits uh, has a team working with him or her, and that can be very helpful.
That's a good idea, and I can see this happening. Yeah, I also have this. I have this feeling. I don't have really research. It's just my own experience. Is that I have a feeling that children take in. They adults have information and they don't maybe act according to that. But I have a feeling that like children might do it a bit better. My child has been watching some TV shows which are really smart, saying about why sugar is bad for you, and it's quite sophisticated, and it's been told in a way that is really interesting to a 5-year-old. And then he's thinking it to himself that should we do that, or like should we take that, and I've been really kind of fascinated that how come it's so important for him. And so I've been thinking that maybe children take it in another, on another level. I don't know.
I'm not an expert on that. I think
Mm.
it's an observation that I share, and I think if I remember back even to my childhood, uh, there were things that I was taught at school or maybe saw in a television program,
Mm.
and yeah, it's a strange experience, because it's almost as though the kid is smarter than the parent on a
Yeah.
certain, and that's interesting. It can be a messy dynamic too, because parents don't generally want to be told what to do by their kids. But I bet there are experts that are aware of this, that something like public wellness messages to 5 to 10 year olds
Yeah,
have
should
certain
look.
impact, and then the same impact on an adult. And it's almost as if you've got a certain amount of public wellness money or time that if you're trying to make the largest impact,
Mm.
it might be better spent uh, on young people in some ways.
Maybe I should look for somebody to come on the podcast to talk about that. So that's a great topic. Yeah. Um, so does your approach, like, or maybe the methods, does it differ when you work with different types of people, or do you usually follow the same kind of like mm, route or path?
No, it definitely is custom, and it's
Mm.
even a better word than custom might be improvisational, in the sense that you don't know what is there with a person until you get to know them, and you don't know why this is important to them. You don't know what their interests and strengths are, and how they will bring those to the table. And so I've seen coaches in different realms, including in wellness, as the field has emerged, and especially before, there's a little more uniformity now, that when people say wellness coaching now, they primarily mean something like applying using self-determination theory as the basis, and using motivational interviewing as the primary methodology. And within that is very much an open-ended, improvisational, let's create this together as we go approach. But before that had congealed, there were definitely more people that would say, all right, I'm going to be your wellness coach for 12 weeks. And in week 1, we're going to work on this. And in week 2, we're going to work on this. And week 3, we're going to work on this. At this point, I would almost consider that to be a distinction between something like education and coaching.
Yeah, true. That's true. Yeah.
But in coaching is still a tricky word, because that model would also work if we're talking about like sports coaching or coaching to learn to play a musical instrument. That might work really well to have a curriculum based on you learn fundamental A first, then you learn fundamental B second. But if we're talking about coaching through the lens of motivational interviewing, then it's not scripted like that.
I think that even like there's this. I think there's just different maybe levels. I'm just thinking even sports coaching. Usually when you start, then it's more you have a curriculum and there's some things you have to do, just to get maybe on a certain level. But
Right.
then when you get there, it becomes more complicated and you don't have this formula anymore. You have to be improvisational, as you said. So yeah, it's a good
I
way
think
of
that's
looking
right.
at that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the new year has started, and people give promises to themselves and to others. Do you have a promise that you have given to yourself about the new year?
Fun question. Really, it's about maintaining boundaries with my schedule. I know the things that are most important to me, both with my work and outside of my work. And I know how those impact each other. And I think technology is a factor. It's very easy to get asked to do things. And most of these things can be done at any time. So we could be doing them early in the morning, late at night, during the week, on the weekend. And it's easy for me to habitually blame that on someone external to me, of why is someone calling me about this on a Saturday morning? But if I'm honest with myself, it's the expectations that I've created. And so that's what I really want to practice this year. And it has to do, to some degree, with these personality types that we've spoken about. Is that's what I have to look at, is what do I think bad will happen if I say no. And I've also learned that it's not black and white. It's sometimes saying, I can't do that right now. I've made time to have those kind of conversations every Thursday between 9 and noon. Does one of those times work for you? And it's a way to collaborate with people, so that you're helping meet their needs while they're still helping meet your needs.
It's a lot of communication, but did I just read between the lines that you there's a bit of one of these types in yourself?
I think, if I'm honest, I've thought about, and our conversation has inspired me that maybe I will do this in the future. One of my visions for my practice / business is, in addition to my personal wellness coaching service, is to have an online community of some kind, where it would take a lot of these ideas and tools and make them available in more of a do-it-yourself format, as a way of reaching more people. And I think an interesting tool on there, like almost an assessment tool, would be something that has 10 or 20 questions, and it rates you as striver, martyr, avoider, thriver, But my vision for this is you wouldn't be one of those things.
Mm.
It would be more like the Myers-Briggs test, where you'd get a percentage.
Mm.
You'd be 30% this, 22% this, 66% this, because that's my experience. Is that I have a little bit of. I don't think I have any avoider in me at this point in my life. I think there definitely were times when I did, but I think I have some martyr and striver in me for sure.
I'm quite sure many of us are a mix of, you know, all this. But yeah, I wish you do that. I'd love to take this test, even though I have a feeling that, you know, what are my percentages maybe. But so do you have any other projects that you'd like to tell about to our listeners, or, you know, from where can people find you if they would like to contact you?
So to projects, I think something worth bringing up is uh, one of my commitments this year is to do make more presentations for businesses.
Mm.
Uh, this is to try to solve that problem of I really really love doing personal wellness coaching, and I think on many levels most people or many people need that kind of attention uh, to make the kinds of lifestyle improvements they need to make. And the only frustrating thing about it is because it's so intensive, the reach remains fairly small.
Mm.
But so if I get into a business that has 5,000 employees and they host me for a wellness talk and 400 of their employees show up, and it's very easy to do now with Zoom and other platforms. That's a neat way to spread some of these ideas further and wider. So if anyone out there is listening that is an employee and would love to have wellness talks, or they're a human resources professional, they could reach out to me. And probably the best way these days is through LinkedIn, just to look me up on LinkedIn, and then contact me through there.
Okay, yes, I hope people will contact you. And I think we are getting into the end of our talk today. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Jason, and I wish all the best for this upcoming year. I hope I will find this test coming up soon somewhere on LinkedIn
Okay.
to my feed. And last but not least, I would like to thank you first, and of course, thank all our listeners for listening to our podcast today. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much for having me, Lise.